Now, there's been many weird things that have happened around the world, especially this year alone. But the more that we try to uncover, the more that we realize that truth is stranger than fiction. Now, in this episode, we're covering an oldie but a goodie. Right now, we are covering the massive old secret project of MK Ultra. Now, many Americans agree that the premise that the government's main responsibility is to protect their citizens. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness have been guaranteed in their Constitution, which forms the bedrock of the United States. Now, they elect government officials, which are individuals who claim to put the people's best interest at heart, and who vow to protect their rights and freedoms. But what happens when one part of an otherwise great institution turns rogue? What happens when one small agency breaks bad? It may surprise people that their U.S. government has been conducting experiments on them without their permission, and in some cases without their knowledge. These tests aren't insinuous or innocent. These tests and experiments were performed on American citizens without their consent and knowledge, and involved the use of biological agents, electric shock, chemical weapons, narcotics, and hypnosis, and psychiatric mind control. Death occurred in at least one instance during these experiments. Now, this may seem like a plot to a James Bond film, but nevertheless, this is a despicable reality and unshameful truth, which it grew to encompass 163 separate experiments, the umbrella under which they resided under the code name Project MK Ultra by the CIA. The CIA is unlike other government agencies that required to operate with a certain degree of transparency and accountability, including checks and balances by others. The CIA, on the other hand, appears to operate with a bubble of roguish impunity, claiming that national security requires them to work outside the boundaries of other mundane departments. Let's see what happens when an agency is given unlimited budget and permission to work outside government forces of accountability and transparency in the name of national security. Here's the hint: it ends in corruption, torture, and death. It began in 1947, the world still reeling from the aftermath of World War II and the shocking brutality of the Nazi Party as it endeavors to implement a program to extreme eugenics, exterminating those deemed unworthy of life, lest they breed and infect the gene pool with their inferior stock, which means the Nazis were really fucking bad. And while the Allied powers have subdued the Nazis, there were still other similar powers at work. The Soviet Union, North Koreans, to name a few, but two. The project started with the laudable goal of protecting the American people of potential threats, which would protect from their own. Fears that countries hostile to the United States would use chemical and biological agents against Americans and its allies led to the development of a defensive program designed to discover techniques for American intelligence agencies to detect and counteract chemical and biological agents. The defensive orientation soon became secondary as possible use of these substances and procedures to obtain information from or gain control over enemy agents became apparent. Research and development to find materials which could be used to alter human behavior that were initiated in the late 1940s and early 1950s. These experimental programs originally included testing of drugs involving willing human subjects and culminated in tests using non-volunteer human subjects. These tests were designed to determine the potential effects of chemical or biological substance when used against individuals unaware that they had received a drug or were on the subject of conceived control. Now, few people, even within the agencies involved, knew of the program, and there is no evidence that either the executive branch or legislative branch were even informed of them. However, the military was involved along with other government agencies, universities, hospitals, and similar institutions. The information that is available was mostly obtained during the hearings held in 1976 and 1977 by the Senate Committees on Intelligence and Human Resources, CIA staff, past and present, testified on record regarding many of the projects, but not all 163 of them. During these hearings, the shocked senators used adjectives like sinister, hideous, and perverse. If this was their first reaction to the known projects, it makes one wonder what occurred in ones that remained hidden from the public. Project Chatter was a covert Navy operation, not one of the CIA's, that was in operation from 1947 through the end of the Korean War in 1953. However, it seemed to be what gave the idea to start one of their own. The Navy got the idea from the Soviets, who supposedly were having amazing results with using hallucinogenic drugs like LSD and scopolamine to compel stubborn subjects to talk. Their own research showed that claims weren't true, but it appears that they got the CIA thinking about the possibilities. Project Bluebird was the first known program by the CIA that used biological and chemical agents. Its purpose was to discover methods that would make the U.S. undercover agents immune to giving up their secrets when interrogated by a foreign power and preventing hostile control over agency personnel. It also studied memory enhancement techniques. After a few years, the project was renamed Artichoke in 1951 to coincide with its change in research. As a result of using these methods overseas, the CIA now wanted to know whether offensive uses of these techniques was possible and incorporated the use of drugs with hypnosis and interrogation techniques to control covert individuals. The CIA began conducting in-house experiments using sodium pentothal along with hallucinogenic drugs, and then subjecting the individuals to hypnosis and special interrogation techniques. On paper, Project Artichoke was officially ended in 1956, but evidence exists to indicate it went on for several years afterwards. In 1952, the Special Operations Division of the CIA began working with the Army to further the research, starting with Artichoke, taking it even further. The goal was to stockpile several incapacitating, and lethal substances to position those materials in the state of immediate readiness for deployment at a moment's notice, and provide the surveillance, testing, and evaluation of biological and chemical material so to be able to completely predictable when used in the field. It was also to establish covert bases, which included those known as safe houses in both San Francisco and New York. And knowing the length of the agency would go into other MK projects, this is just quite tame and humane in comparison. During MK Naomi, the CIA and Army partners developed biological weapons that would work against crop and livestock, with at least 3 that would covertly eradicate crops at a large scale. MK Naomi was officially disbanded in the 1970s, following a directive by President Nixon to destroy all biological agents that had the power to kill or incapacitate, following some shenanigans involving somatics. The president amended his directive to include the destruction and ban of toxins as biological weapons. The directive probably provided assurances to the American people that they were safe, protected from unwitting escape of biological and chemical materials that have been weaponized. However, 5 years later, one scientist in a little-used laboratory on the Army's Fort District was found hoarding 11 grams of highly poisonous shellfish toxins, despite direct orders to relinquish it. Despite the might of the office of the presidency, the Army, and the CIA, it all came down to the behaviors and characteristics of an individual. That's what these agencies are. Collaboration of individuals, all of whom have their own agendas. Project MKUltra was the granddaddy of CIA projects and built upon the research findings of predecessors. All records relating to MKUltra were destroyed in 1973 on the orders of Dr. Sidney Globly, Chief of Technical Services Division, who subsequently testified before Congress that he was acting on the verbal orders of Deputy Director Richard Helms. The stated purpose of Project Ultra was concerned with research and development of chemical, biological, and radioactive material capable of employment in operations to control human behaviors. Project MKUltra was given permission for a special funding mechanism given the highly sensitive nature of the project. It proposed secret funding avenues and essential a free rein over funds received. It justified the lack of transparency as necessary due to the extreme sensitivity. 4 reasons for this extreme sensitivity were: research regarding the manipulation of human behavior is considered by many to be professionally unethical, jeopardizing the reputation of professionals who are needed to work within the project. Some MKUltra activities raised questions of legality, ethics, and similar considerations. The final phase of testing of MKUltra products places the rights of interests of U.S. citizens in jeopardy. Public discourse of some aspects of MKUltra could cause serious problems with the U.S.'s public opinion, in addition to invoking both offensive and defensive actions in the field part of foreign intelligence services. What was MKUltra exactly? The CIA defined it as research to develop capability in the covert use of biological and chemical materials. Looking behind the satanization language, the agency was developing secret weapons that could control human behavior. It justified the creation of such weapons to enable us to protect ourselves against a foe who might not be restrained in the use of these techniques as they are, but over its 10-year span of operations, many additional avenues to control human behavior were deemed appropriate for investigation under the MKUltra Charter. These included radiation, electroshock, various fields of psychology, psychiatry, sociology, graphology, harassment, substances, and paramilitary device and materials. The research and development of materials to be used to alter human behavior consisted of 3 phases. First, the search for materials suitable for study. Second, laboratory testing on voluntary human subjects in various types of institutions. Third, application of MKUltra materials in normal life settings. Much of it was done with American citizens who were completely unknowingly terms of taking various drugs, and perhaps a number of Americans who are walking around today in the East Coast and West Coast that were given drugs with all kinds of physical and psychological damage that can be caused. Almost as scary as the tests, although they would perhaps be more accurately termed assaults, were the institution agencies that participated in these experiments. Hospitals, universities, prisons, scientists, and other government agencies were complicit with the CIA's activities, especially those in charge of keeping people safe. For example, one of the first experiments conducted under MKUltra involved the National Institute of Mental Health. The study was intended to test various drugs, including hallucinogenics, at the Addiction Research Center in Lexington, Kentucky. The Lexington Rehabilitation Center was a prison for the drug addicts serving sentences of drug violation. The test subjects were volunteer prisoners who, after taking brief physical examination and signing general consensus forms, were administered hallucinogenic drugs. As rewarded for participation in the program, the addicts were provided with the drug of their addiction. LSD was one of the materials tested in MKUltra program and involved covert administration to unwitting non-volunteer subjects in normal life settings by undercover officers of the Bureau of Narcotics acting for the CIA. The rationale for such testing was that the testing of materials under accepted scientific procedures fails to disclose the full pattern of reaction and attributes that may occur in operational situations, meaning that the only way to fully understand the effects of given the drugs to a target enemy without their knowledge or consent would be to replicate that scenario in real life to study the outcome. During the 1977 Senate committee hearing, the current director of the agency were asked about the 146 tests that were conducted by agents with the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, where they slipped LSD into drinks of unaware bar patrons in New York and San Francisco, causing some to become violently ill and required hospitalization. The director responded by explaining that only 6 of the 146 alleged cases had been confirmed and that they lacked the evidence to determine whether the other 140 bar patrons were voluntary or involuntary test subjects. Given the fact that the test was designed to specifically gauge real-life effects that given LSD to an unsuspecting person would have, indicates that the 140 bar patrons were all likelihood unaware that they have been drugged. Why did MKUltra incorporate drugs into their experiments, going as far as to weaponize them? The evidence indicates that need to protect themselves against threats posed by communist countries like China, Korea, and the Soviet Union became secondary to desire to perfect the techniques to extract information from unwilling subjects and to develop means for the control of activities and mental capacities of individuals, whether willing or not. One CIA official noted that drugs would be useful in order to gain control of bodies, whether they were willing or not. At least one death came about as a result of unwitting deposit of LSD. Dr. Frank Olson was slipped 80 micrograms of LSD by the CIA agent in an alcoholic beverage. He subsequently had a bad reaction that lasted many days. The agents were forced to reveal the drugging, as Dr. Olson required emergency medical help. When the effects continued, it was arranged that he would receive psychiatric treatment from experts employed by the MKUltra agents. They booked Dr. Olson into a Statler hotel in the city while he awaited his appointment the following morning. At 2:30 a.m. on November 28th, 1953, the agent assigned to stay with Dr. Olson was awakened by a loud crash. Dr. Olson had crashed through the closed window blinds and closed window, and he fell to his death window from his room from the 10th floor. Despite the death of Dr. Olson, the program continued to deploy drugs against involuntary and willing individuals. The deputy director defended the use of these real-life experiments against U.S. citizens and those other countries. Deputy Director Richard Helms said during discussion regarding the waiting testing, "While I share your uneasiness and distaste for any program which tends to intrude upon an individual's private and legal, I believe that it was necessary that the agency maintain a central role in the activity, keeping on enemy capacity and manipulate human behaviors to maintain an offensive capability." Indeed, the sent data that was available indicates that a number of projects involved the use of converted drugs administration greatly increased the following death of Frank Olson. In 1984, American journalists uncovered an MKUltra experiment being conducted on Canadians at Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal. The project was led by Dr. Hugh Cameron, an American psychiatrist. Dr. Mary Morrow went to Dr. Cameron seeking a fellowship in psychiatry. She happened to disclose that she had experimental depression in the past. Dr. Cameron focused her to undergo his brands of sleep therapy in order for him to sign off on her fellowship. Dr. Morrow was led to believe that this would entail mild sedatives to conjure with a period of rest, so she agreed to sleep for a large majority of each day and left her without the ability to function, let alone protest. And then there was the psychic driving. The term psychic driving refers to brainwashing that was accomplished by subjecting her to recorded messages upwards of 500,000 times after being drugged, making her more susceptible to the message. What was the result of that? Dr. Mary Morrow completely lost her identity, and this is how she describes it. "I was suspended in space in a deep black hole. I had no idea I was a human being. I was without knowledge of appendages. I had no sense of solidarity. I was floating. I was completely disoriented. I thought I was an organism." Dr. Morrow was forced to leave her medical career as her sleep therapy caused permanent brain damage. Project MKUltra was just one of 163 projects conducted by the CIA to develop the and perfect the ability to control individuals without their knowledge and their consent. It appears that MKUltra was the fourth project, meaning that there was a vast majority that came about to further stated aims. When questioned by the Senate committee, CIA staff said that other programs were developed, produced, and stockpiled and maintained in operational readiness materials, which could used as to harass, disable, and kill specific targets. Now, do you feel safer knowing that the U.S. government worked so hard to protect you from outside threats, these foreign devils, but who would protect them against their own protectors? Now, that was everything. That was honestly a big mouthful to go over, but it was honestly a pretty interesting case to find, even like, because every country has their shady moments, but the United States actually had some bad dirt in the past, which is obviously hopefully all over now, but it still makes things a little stranger than it still makes truth like this way stranger than fiction. I'm Ben Goldsmith, and thanks for watching this episode. If you want more episodes like this, then make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have a suggestion on another subject that you want me to talk about, or even a nice fancy costume for me to dress in, since I got this nice little security uniform. Other than that, make sure you comment down below, subscribe, and hit that bell notification.